Folks, it is Wednesday, and y'all know what time it is. It's time for another edition of Wednesday Wisdom. Y'all can leave your questions up here in the question box, and I'll be answering them all day. And I've got this guy following me around all day too. I have no idea where that content's gonna go.
There isn't a lot of me time. Sure, I like to run, and sure, I like to wake up early and kind of get out on the trails and have some time to myself. But I do spend a lot of time working. I've been very deliberately structuring that over the last few years because I know we're in a very unique point in time in trail and ultra running that is not going to last forever, and I'm just trying to take the most advantage of it that I can. My name is Jason Koop. I'm an ultramarathon coach. I've been coaching for nearly 25 years now. I've been doing it as a professional every step of the way, and it's been something that I've considered myself really fortunate to kind of fall into this profession really early and be able to continue it kind of throughout my career. I started actually coaching as a teenager with the youth track and field club that I actually ran for. So somebody that I owe a big debt of gratitude to, Tom Clark, who ran the Texas Stars Track Club in Dallas, Texas. He literally needed another set of hands to help, kind of serve as part-time babysitter, part-time track coach for all these youth track and field athletes. And serendipitously, I just happened to be one of the older, more mature people in the group, and so he kind of turned that over to me. And I just really loved it so much, and the rest is kind of history from that. Coaches inevitably are jacks and jills of all trades and kind of masters of none of them. And I really try to exude that philosophy with each athlete and try to figure out what they individually need. So some of them need a whole lot of programming and a little bit of emotional support and some kind of planning. Other athletes need a lot of emotional support and very little programming and a little bit of file analysis. And that whole alphabet soup of things that coaches can provide can really vary from athlete to athlete to athlete. So my role, I really kind of boil it down to figuring out what that mix is for each individual person, and then going to that person with where they're at, meeting them where they're at, and trying to deliver what those things are in order to get them to be a better athlete. When I served as director of coaching at CTS, we made all of our coaches come up with their own coaching philosophy. So it's 60 coaches underneath our umbrella, 60 coaching philosophies. And when they all came back, they were all within, a couple of different shades with a proximity to each other. I want to coach the whole athlete, and I believe in supporting the athlete through thick and thin, kind of things like that. And then we scoured the landscape of all of the coaches, and they weren't all that dissimilar from the pool of coaches that we were actually going to. So, I use that as a little bit of a backdrop to say that I don't know if boiling it down to a coaching philosophy is the right way to actually describe it. I normally like to describe what I actually do. So what I actually do is try to do anything within my power to help an athlete move the needle. And sometimes that's as simple as listening to them on the phone. Sometimes that's as complex as going and building an entire high performance team around them so that they can, have the best of everything. So it's really that I really try to not focus so much on the philosophy and try to really look to the actions that I can actually bring to each athlete. What I will say is that there are literally hundreds of coaches that are just like you that are desiring the exact same thing in terms of trying to build up some type of mentorship and development community. So go out and just reach out to people and just ask them questions. Go to conferences, go to races, go wherever there's a coaching hub. If you're ever in another city, look up a couple of coaches and take them to coffee. You have to deliberately build it yourself, because just within our remote-based work environment right now, those opportunities to actually sit down amongst fellow colleagues, it really doesn't exist unless you're at one of the Olympic training centers or in some sort of other high performance environment with any of the team sports. So you've got to go out and deliberately build it at this point. You can't really ask it for it to be built for you and to fall into it like I did. It was a 10-to-1 ratio. For every 10 mistakes I was making, I was doing one thing right. And having that expertise, having access to that expertise day after day after day for years made a very big impact on me, because it's not that they're just telling me the information that I need to know. They're telling me how to acquire the information that I'm going to need later. And I've tried to pay that forward in my coaching career in any number of different ways, through the mentorship that I've given other coaches and some of the content that I put out in the space and things like that. But that piece of it, I wouldn't be here today, sitting in front of a camera and having published 2 books and working with all these remarkable athletes and things like that. I certainly wouldn't be here today without that influence, because they very much took 5 years of my career and kind of and shaped it in an extremely impactful way that I could not have done by myself. So you can go to the ends of the earth to try to improve your coaching acumen through education and podcasts and courses and books. I've got all these books that I've all read over the course of my coaching career and things like that. And you can definitely take that to the nth degree, looking at scientific papers and things like that. But really what I found is that the most valuable is actually working with the coaches that are already doing a fantastic job and have kind of already made it, so to speak. They're the ones that have had a lot of high performance athletes, gold medal types of performances, and looking at not only what they do, but how they do it, and then how they change it for each athlete. And then taking that as a blueprint for, okay, what am I now going to do with my athlete? Is it go reading more books? Is it listening to more podcasts? Or is it actually listening to the athletes more? There's any number of different directions that you take, but I think that using the people who have already demonstrated success over long periods of time to find that blueprint is the best way to find a blueprint for yourself, because coaching inevitably, it doesn't have a formalized pipeline for much of anything. So everybody's out there hanging their own shingle trying to figure things out. And the best way to figure it out is just to look at the people who have been successful and to try to draw some inspiration from them. The landscape changes just so quickly, and not all that change you actually need to adapt to. So it's 2 things, right? You've got to keep on top of what's coming down the pipeline, but you also have to keep on top of how to filter that correctly, and then apply what needs to be applied to the athlete and disregard the noise. And that's not easy, because everybody has an opinion nowadays, and just because they have an opinion doesn't necessarily mean that they're an expert. And so once again, I've tried to keep my social media and my sphere of people who influence me fairly tight, and only expand on that radius in very deliberate, calculated steps, so that I'm not listening to a lot of noise, and I realize that what I am listening to is extremely high quality and comes with a level of trust that I can really rely on. Because ultimately, like as a coach, your counsel is your currency. So if I tell an athlete to go and do a particular workout, or to take a supplement, or to do a particular routine or whatever, they don't care how I vetted it, or if I vetted it, or whatever. They care about how it actually affects them, and is that going to affect them positively or negatively or neutral. And I can't pass the buck. I can't say, well, this workout didn't work for you because I got it from so and so and I just copy pasted it onto here. That's going to fall on deaf ears pretty quickly. So you've got to trust the circle that you're kind of like building around you. And if I could give anybody advice on this, it's just to be very calculated about that, because there's way more noise than signal out there in the endurance training space right now. So AI is like the 3rd technological innovation or revolution that I've been in as a coach, where the coaches look at it and say, we're all going to be out of business. First, it was heart rates and power meters, and then it was online technology platforms and things to like analyze the file. and now it's artificial intelligence. And at every single one of those inflection points, and the AI revolution is not going to be any different from this. The people that look at the technology and say, how do I leverage it to make my athletes better? Those are the people that stay in business and whose athletes are better served. The people who look at it and get all scared, oh my gosh, like big bad technology is coming for me. They're all coming for our jobs and I can do it better because I've been doing it this way for 20 years or whatever. Those are the coaches that, first off, they end up underserving their athletes because they're under leveraging the revolution that's actually happening or the advancement that's actually happening. And second, they usually go out of business 3 or 5 years after that transition actually takes place. We saw that in cycling very clearly, where the landscape changed in the kind of the early 2000s, and you saw the people that adapted to that landscape and the people that did not. We're going to see the same thing with the technology that's going on right now with artificial intelligence and large language models and machine learning and things like that, where it is going to be, from a business perspective, adapt or die. And then from an athlete perspective, they're going to be better served just because they have more tools and resources available to them. So the economy of scale that most coaches are working with are 10 athletes, 20 athletes, 30 athletes, and 40 athletes. We're not talking hundreds or even thousands of athletes. So because of that economy of scale, or because of the amount of customers that you're actually looking to acquire, coaches don't have to play these big social media data games essentially to build up their business. They can use social media certainly for other reasons. They either like it, they want to contribute to the community, they want to have like a leadership voice with it and things like that. That's a separate category. But if you're looking at it from a building your business standpoint, that doesn't have to be the end all be all. You can absolutely go in hand-to-hand combat and personally, get references and referrals and things like that, and build up a remarkably robust coaching business just using that, and then using social media for other things because you like it, for continuing education purposes and things like that. Working with elite athletes, a lot of coaches initially aspire to do that, but it's not for everybody. So the first thing is to realize is it for you? And I think the best way to get that perspective is to talk to the people who actually work with a lot of elite athletes and have been doing it for a long period of time. What you'll hear the most commonly is that there's a different level of scrutiny on your work product because everything that you produce is so very visible and public. And that means when your athletes do exceedingly well and they win races, you get a lot of credit because there's a big spotlight on them and there's a whole lot of attention and things like that. But when they perform poorly or they get injured, the polar opposite of that is also true. And the blame, rightfully or wrongfully, kind of comes down to the coach as well. And not everybody has a stomach for that. That is absolutely 100% part of the landscape if you start working with elite athletes. You have to understand if you've got the stomach for that or not. And if you do, great, then you can work on the skill sets that you need to work with high-level athletes, which are different than the skill sets that you need when you're not working with high-level athletes. But then you also have to kind of condition yourself or harden yourself, or also develop some type of armor for that potential scrutiny that comes down the pipeline, because it will, because not all your athletes are going to win everything. You're going to have athletes that crash, that get injured, that do poorly, that drop out of races, and to a certain degree that falls back on the coach. And I always think that coaches should take very, very, very little credit when their athletes do well, especially publicly. They should take very little credit when their athletes do well. But when they do poorly, the coach should be the first person to go to the athlete and say, let's figure out what I screwed up in the training and the communication and the programming and things like that, because something kind of went awry that I could have helped. And we do have an issue in coaching with that, where the opposite is actually true, where when an athlete has a lot of success, the coach is the first person to take a lot of credit and takes too much of the credit. And when the athlete performs rather poorly, they're the first person to kind of throw their hands up and say, well, it's not my fault. It's kind of something else. It should be the opposite. Coaching doesn't have a formal education pipeline. like I keep coming back to this, that there's a real need in the marketplace for it. And so coaches who want to become coaches are stuck with a few very limited pathways. They either take what they did as an athlete and regurgitate it. They either look at other coaches out there and they paint by numbers from what they're doing, or they try to go and re-educate themselves somehow. And that's hard because, if you were to step into coaching as a 35-year-old or a 40-year-old, getting into a college exercise science program or coaching program or something like that is not the easiest thing to do in the world at that stage of life. And so I partnered with UESCA to create a kind of an educational course specifically for ultramarathon coaches. So people who wanted to become ultramarathon coaches, they really didn't have any direction. And really, it's the basis of it is how I would train the coaches at CTS. We took a lot of that curricula and put it in and put it into an educational course. Now, that's not the only thing. We very much meant it to be a way to initially get your foot in the door and to have some grounding with what you would initially start to coach with. There are always going to be steps after that, and those steps can be any number of different ones, from finding mentors in the space, going out to races and kind of like learning yourself, going up, looking at the scientific literature, reading books and things like that. There's a number of different pathways that you can kind of continue that, but we realized that there was a need in the marketplace for a place to start, just to get the fundamentals, the foundation down, so that you can use that as a platform to kind of expand your knowledge base from. First and foremost, I honestly think that we need to come to a better consensus on our business models, because when I look out at the space right now, you have coaches that coach 10, 20, 30 athletes, and you have coaches that coach 300 or 400 athletes. And on paper, to the public and to the people who are viewing the websites and things like that, the way that those services can be construed to be delivered are indistinguishable. Both offer one-on-one coaching, both offer some sort of analysis and things like that. And that cannot be the case. You can't have a scale of 10 where the service delivery is exactly the same. You don't see that in any other service industry. So I think that first and foremost, not everybody has to have the exact same business, but we need to be able to call a spade and say that there's an individualized level of coaching, and then there's mass coaching where there's, static programs that are being used and copy pasting that is being used and things like that. There's nothing wrong with that. We just have to be honest with these two differences in business models that are out there. And I think the second thing that we need that coaches generally need to realize is that regardless of the endurance pool that you're playing in, whether it's running or cycling or triathlon, or in my case, ultramarathon running, that pool is very small. So whatever you do affects the entire ecosystem. And that's that is regardless of its how you deliver a service to an athlete, what you're actually promising that you're going to do, how you present how you present yourself in the marketplace, the price points that you're at, all of those things. Yes, everybody's trying to run their own individual businesses, but when you do something, it actually does affect the rest of the landscape, because that landscape is so small. So I wish that we would just collectively as a kind of a unit of coaches, so to speak, or as a brotherhood and sisterhood of coaches, kind of come to realize that, because I do think that when we're all doing the same things and we're doing them in a transparent way, it's good for everybody. And I'll actually say that that's one more thing that I hope that we can come to consensus on, is that the athlete owns their data. So if you're delivering a service to an athlete, that's theirs to have and to hold for forever. It's not a coach's proprietary mix of whatever it is to all of a sudden redact or take back after the relationship ends. We have to put the athlete at the centerpiece of the conversation and our actions. And when you do that, you realize that it's their data, it's their training, it's their races that they're actually doing, their accomplishments, not the coaches' accomplishments. So if we can get to this space where the athletes are first, I think that everything else just kind of emanates from there. My number one artist on Spotify, probably my number two and number three and number four and number five artists as well, is definitely Taylor Swift.